So this is Eliza. She has a music school in Perth, which is currently operating out of her house. I'm Sharon. I started my music school operating out of my house in Melbourne, and we've been in a commercial premises now for about a year. And we were just having a discussion before we started the recording of this about the spaces that you need for groups and what equipment you might need. And I think that's can be quite a barrier for people who are like, oh, I've only ever done private lessons. How on earth would this even work? So my experience was I actually started teaching, I'm a piano player myself. I started teaching the Keynotes group piano program, which I love and recommend, on Zoom. We had lockdowns of something like a year all up. And I was like, either I'm going to do this or I'm not. This is the only option open to me right now. Off I go. But what that meant is that I could start teaching group piano classes without having to invest in a studio full of digital pianos for students to play. So in that way, it's kind of made it a bit of an easier barrier for me to jump in. The technical thing we all had to learn how to do. But it meant I didn't have to buy a studio full of digital pianos. But by the time we came out of all those lockdowns, I knew I had students. And I knew I had some students who were keen but weren't that keen to do it on Zoom. So it was an easy decision for me to make when the time came. And the story goes that there's lots of things I love about how the Keynotes piano program works. And I couldn't find a guitar program that had that structure that I think is pretty much essential for group classes to make them be sustainable in the long term. And that is that the two main features that I was really looking for is every song already has multiple difficulty levels built into them. You can call them extension challenges, you can call them difficulty levels. But it means that when you're in that classroom with a group of students in front of you, you're not having to think on the fly of, well, this is what the song is, but what do I do with this student who's brand new, who's never held the instrument or touched the instrument? And what do I do with this other student who's been learning for 6 months and they're going to be bored with an easy version? They're all there for you. They're written into mental blank. Lesson plans, that's the term I was looking for. They're written into lesson plans and they're explained in teacher training videos. So that feature we have in our group guitar program. And the other feature that is also, I think, essential is that the programs are cyclical. And by that, we mean that for every age group, if you want to look at it like that, and the age groups are a little bit kind of overlapping and elastic, there's, say, 5 workbooks that can be done in any order. And if you think of a workbook lasting for, say, a term, so the beginning of the year, we're all starting a brand new workbook, brand new students alongside previous students. Obviously, the brand new students will start with tackling the easiest versions of those songs, and the more experienced students are going to be tackling the more difficult versions. But what that means is, say, your 4-year-old to 6 or 7-year-old group, you've got a 4-year-old. Now, their dexterity is still developing, their capacity to understand concepts that you teach them is still developing. They might need all 5 of those workbooks before they're mastering the hard versions of everything. But the 6-year-old or the 7-year-old that's in that same class, maybe they only need 1 or 2. And then they're going to move up to the next level, which also has 5 workbooks. So what that means is that you've got a pathway for every individual student based on where they're at any given point in time. And the ones who are practicing heaps are going to churn through that really quickly. And the ones who need more time and more consolidation and more opportunities to master those same skills, they're going to do that. It also means that if you find you've got a space in a class, somebody moved interstate or whatever, that you can bring a new student into that class and not have the situation of, but they missed the first whatever number of pages of the book, so they don't know how to play these things because they haven't learned what's come before. There'll always be an entry-level easy version of every song in every book at every week of every term. So that's what gives it its structure that means that groups can work. If you just grab whatever method book you might know and love and use in one-on-one lessons, which is linear. You're building on, the skills that you learn and the concepts that you learn in the first few lessons are then built upon, and it's assumed that you know those earlier ones. That doesn't work in groups over the long term. It might work for a while if you happen to be able to put together a group of students who have fairly similar levels of ability, but sooner or later, someone's practicing more and they shoot ahead, somebody's not practicing and they kind of stall, and somebody leaves the class, and how can you bring a new person in?
Yeah.
So having all of that done for you makes a huge difference. And I built my studio on that. I was able to develop it and, grow students that needed to be grown and challenge them and give the consolidation and support and scaffolding to the students that needed it as well. In addition to all of that, you get to play in an ensemble from day one. Now, my experience as a child learning my piano lessons in a one-on-one setting, that never happened.
No.
And it was kind of like you weren't allowed to, no one ever said it, but you weren't really allowed to play with other musicians until you were good enough, whatever that means. What does good enough mean? So there's all these piano students beavering away on their own in a rehearsal room by themselves. And when I think, I still work as a musician, when I think of the most memorable music experiences that I've had, they're generally with other musicians.
Yeah.
Would that be true of you as well?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So other things that you gain in a group setting that you don't gain in a private lesson is that you're learning to play in time with other musicians and be listening to other musicians. That's not the same as a metronome. It's just not.
A little bit more nice.
Well, it's not only more nice, like if you think about, and this is sort of a crazily big picture, but in the early days of humankind, we were singing together, and we were stamping on the ground together, and we were whacking anything against each other that made a percussion sound together. I don't actually, there's scope, and I've done plenty of solo gigs myself, but there is lots of scope for the human interaction that comes with communally making music. And so there's lots to love about a group setting for learning an instrument if it's done right. There are people, sorry?
So for instance, in one of the group classes, they might all work on the same song and then try to play that one song like all at once, with
Absolutely.
the students playing the different levels.
Yep. So and what I also love, so they're definitely all playing the same song together. Two thoughts I just had. Let's deal with one of them first. There are people call them group classes. You might call them like a lab style class, where you would have a group of students. If they're keyboard students, they might all be in headphones or whatever instrument it is, all working on completely different material. And maybe they get together and do a theory game or something as a few minutes within the class. But generally they're working independently, and the teacher goes round to them one at a time and checks in with them. I don't really think of that as a group class. I think it has none of the benefits of ensemble playing or collaborative learning. And it's less good than a private lesson because you've only got a few minutes with the teacher. So to me, that's not really a group class. Maybe that's a lab style class. So occasionally I'll be talking to a prospective parent and they'll say, oh, we tried group classes before and they were terrible. My child only got 5 minutes of attention from the teacher. And I have to kind of go, all right. And it becomes an education process. That's how that class worked. What we're offering is something quite different, and then I talk them through how it all works. So yes, everybody's playing the same song together at the same time. Some people are doing really easy versions, some people are doing moderately easy versions, some people are doing hard versions. And another thing that I like about that, and we don't necessarily talk about it overtly to young children, but it's opening their imagination to the idea that arrangements can be varied and all valid. It's very different from the kind of more classical leaning way of thinking about it, of what's on the page is correct.
Yeah.
Sorry?
There's just only one version of a song that exists.
Yeah, and that's correct, and any variation to that is incorrect. And, you know, I did the jazz course at WAPA, the Academy of Performing Arts. So, you know, improvisation is something that's, you know, built into my musical DNA, and playing it in the way that works in that moment with those musicians at that time. And not that we go into all of this kind of theoretical stuff in detail with a small child who's just grappling with how to play the instrument, but they know that the person next to them is playing something different, and that they know that the teacher's doing two hands at the same time, but they're not being required to right now. And they know that there's other versions that they can be learning. So that message is definitely going to them that music can be made of multiple components, and all of them have a part to play, and they're all valid. So I kind of like that we're giving that right from the beginning. The other thing that happens in group classes is that they perform in front of each other right from day one. So whilst there are there'll always be people who are nervous to perform, but what a lovely way to introduce the idea of performing in front of people in a low risk, comfortable environment of supportive people, of your peers, so that when it does come time for a concert or a recital or a show or a gig or a public speaking in a career that's nothing to do with music, if they've been performing in front of each other as a 4-year-old, does that major life hurdle become a bit easier?
Yeah.
There's lots to love about group classes.
Yeah.
Would you like me to show you some of the materials?
Yeah, I'd be curious. So, I mean, so if I purchased it, so I would get like the workbooks, and then are there like separate lesson plans for like a teacher?
Yep, workbooks, lesson plans, teacher training videos, and demonstration videos for your students and their parents to help them learn the song. So if they go home and they can't remember how to do it, they watch the video.
Cool. Yeah.
And just a bunch of games and some resources on how to set up your space and all that kind of thing. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to talk about, setting up your space. So when I started teaching in a room in my house, I ended up with a group room and a private lesson room, and the group room initially had 4 digital pianos in it. Eventually we squeezed a 5th one in there. And when it came time for group guitar classes, the 2 rows of digital pianos, one moved forward, one moved back. We used the same piano stools for our guitar students. We popped some music stands in the little gap we'd created in the middle. Suddenly it's a group guitar room. And students brought their own guitar. So what I would suggest is pretty useful, I would even go as far as essential equipment, is a multiple guitar rack. And there's written information and, you know, a picture of what I mean by that in the materials, because you want them to be able to arrive, take the guitar out of the case and put it somewhere that's safe while they get their book out and get organised, and also that there's somewhere safe to put the guitar when they're doing written stuff or games or, you know, things where they're not holding the instrument. Cool. $50 from an online retailer in your area. It's not a big deal to get one, but it's pretty important to have a safe place to store the instruments. And young kids in particular don't necessarily have that sense of their own body in space, and then you add an instrument that extends further than their body, and bash into your neighbour with your guitar. You need to think about where you're going to put people in this space to minimise. So I might share my screen and show you what sort of ages of students are you thinking you might have?
Oh goodness, I haven't actually thought that far.
That's okay.
I think probably like I wouldn't have any younger than 8.
Okay.
So yep, 8 or over, really.
So this is what the website looks like. There's a video workshop there. There's a bit of information about it. There's a little taster of what some of the books look like. If you have not yet signed up, you won't see the bit that says My Library. That's only available to you once you've signed up. And if you click that, then you see our 4+ program, our 7+ and 9+, and I might dig into the 7+ for you. And then down here, there's tips, resources, and games, all sorts of stuff there. And just so that
Actually, so would you recommend organizing the group classes by age, just like that?
it's a combination of age and how much guitar experience they have. Or if they tell you they've played, 4 years of violin or something, some of that information is going to be transferable, some not so much. So, like if somebody's 6 and you've got this class and this and a 7+ class, and the only time they can come is the 7+ class, that's fine. Like they're a guide, they're not absolutely you have to do it this way. And that's probably a pretty good overarching concept as well, that all of the materials, consider them to be like a menu. You pick and choose which bits work for the students that you have in front of you and for, the policies of your studio and the culture of your studio. And it's not like a McDonald's franchise where if you don't do it my way, it's wrong and you're in trouble. No, you pick which bits work for you and you use them in a way that works for you. So I've already downloaded these so that I didn't have to sit here waiting on the Zoom to do them. So here we have a book called Mystery. I've opened that on the left, and on the right, I've opened the lesson plan for that book. We've got a little reference page there, and you can see that these are all the same chords, but there are easier versions and harder versions. So already there's differentiation in there, and that's just a little diagram to help kind of explain the basics of how to hold the instrument. So the first song that we've got is Footsteps, and the objective is here, play an open E note. It's also written at the bottom of every song, and then the lesson plans goes through a bunch of concepts. Now, if you've got a class who's all been playing guitar for 6 months, you're not going to need to explain that the first highest string is closest to the ground. They already know that. But if you do have brand new students who've never held a guitar in their hand before, you are going to explain that. We've got a little diagram where they're going to write in the E, and that's useful to help consolidate that knowledge. And then when they go home and they're like, where was that E? They've got this information to refer back to. And what we've got here is 2 parts to the song, which can be played together like a duet, a really simple one for a beginner and a more complex one. Now, the teacher might play that one along with students. You might have multiple students in the class playing one or the other or whatever, or some of them playing the chords. And that's all detailed here in the challenges. So challenge 1 is the main melody reading tablature. I know you're not a guitarist. Are you familiar with what I mean when I say tablature?
Oh yeah, I've definitely heard about it. I don't know how to read it, but I know
Okay. So just in case there's someone watching the video. So what's written at the top here, that's the notation that most instruments are familiar with reading. That's a treble clef, and there's the 5 lines of the stave. And the higher a note is written on the stave, the higher the pitch of it, and the reverse is also true. The lower a note is written on the stave, the lower the pitch of it. Tablature is just for guitarists. You'll notice there's 6 lines instead of 5, and those 6 lines represent the 6 strings. Yeah. So this very top line on the tablature represents this E. And when I say the top note, I mean the highest in pitch, the thinnest string, and it's the one closest to the ground. That's a bit confusing for beginner guitarists. And the next string here is the B string, which is this string here on the guitar, etc. And it goes all the way down to here. This E string is the lowest pitch, which is the thickest string, which is the physically highest on the guitar. So the thing about guitar is that any given note, an E, could theoretically be played on a number of different strings in a number of different fret positions. So for guitarists, that means that if they're looking at a note, they instantly have to make a decision of which string and which fret they're going to play that note on, which is an extra level of difficulty that instruments like piano, where there's only one place you can play this E, Played at an octave higher or lower, it's a different E. It's not that E, but that's not true for guitar. And then the zeros are telling you what frets to use. So this song, if you can read notation, you can see pretty quickly is entirely the same note. It's all E, it's an open string. It's a great way to start a brand new beginner because they don't have to coordinate pressing down their finger onto the fret. They can just, not have to be doing that. And so then you're pretty much going to teach it by rote because we're not expecting a brand new beginner who's never played anything to understand the difference between half and quarter notes and all that other stuff. And for a one-note song, reading the tablature versus reading the notation is much of a muchness. But when there's lots of notes going on, you can see here there's a lot more that has to be processed. Yeah. There are lots of guitarists who don't read notation at all. Some of the finest guitarists in the world don't read notation at all. And that's like if they've come from a part of music where it's much more about playing by ear and listening to what's going on for other musicians, that can be the case. And some of them quite a lot of them will be able to read the tablature. So we've written the books with both the teachers and the students in mind. So looking at part 2, it probably makes this a bit clearer, but you can see they call it the melodic contour. You can see the high notes are higher and then it goes down and then it goes up again and then it goes down. And that's what the tune does. Whereas looking at the tablature, you're not seeing the curve of the melody visually represented in the same way. So there might be a guitar teacher that you have who's a little bit rusty on the notation and they're much more comfortable with the tablature. But the longer they teach and they keep seeing the two together, it's going to kind of seep in. And the same is true for students. So you might have a student that only reads tablature for the first book that they do, but by the second, third, fourth, whatever, they're going to be always seeing these two side by side, and it's going to help consolidate that. The other thing we've done is color code it. So these are all new terminology. You don't want to be saying to your very young new beginner, can you read the treble clef, please? You're going to say, so you're going to be looking at those blue ones there, that's for you. And for you, other student, you can be showing me how you're going to play those red ones. And it just means that there's less terminology that we're going to try and get them to get on top of all at once. Now we've got 2 notes. So we're on to the second song of the book. There's an objective, we're going to play F, and it says that down here. We've also got staccato, so that's another concept to think about. We've got some rests in there. Again, part 1 is just the 2 notes, the E's and the F's, and each time there's a new note introduced, you'll see the letter name written inside it. And here, a more complex part. There's a bunch of stuff in the lesson plan. There's the challenges all written out there for you. Song 3, we've got 3 notes and they're all on this same string to start with. We're not moving around the guitar too much to get them started. They're learning G. Now we've moved on to the second string here. So we've got, this is week 4 of the term. Some more songs. I don't kind of know what else to say about them, but play B, C, and D on the second string. Who stole the cookie? And they're all themed. Every single song has lyrics, which, apart from making it kind of hang together as there's like a narrative through the book, it's much easier, I find, for a student to learn a rhythm if there's lyrics involved than if they're still trying to get the hang of how rhythms work if it's just a melody without lyrics. So, you know, you'd commonly get them to sing it by rote with the lyrics, sing the note names. Now I've got another song, Where is the Treasure? And that is 2 parts to that. What's behind the tree?
So do you sell the books hard copy, or like are they PDFs and then like I would have to print them out?
They are, so everything's PDF, so this is available anywhere in the world. We have all of the PDFs in actually 4 forms. So in Australia, we use A4 paper, as do some other countries. So we have the A4 home print version, and that would be if you're just going to print it yourself on a printer that you have. I tend to get mine commercially printed because I love that I upload it to a website and a couple of days later a nice shiny box of shiny books arrives on my doorstep. And for commercial printing, they actually print it on a great big roll of paper and then trim it to size. So I can open one for you. That basically it needs to be a bit bigger and have a little trim mark on every corner. And then they trim it back to, in Australia, A4, and we also have the US letter versions of both of those.
Right.
So everything that you need is PDFs that you download.
Easy. And so, like, how long would a class, like, just 30-minute lesson?
We do 30 minutes. I think there are people that
just like sort of one lesson plan, so like one song per lesson.
Yeah. So the terms, so the and the final song in the book is the 3-part harmony one. This one's a maze. And then depending on how long your term goes for, you can do a review week where you would go back and review songs that you've done earlier, and potentially students could work on a more complex difficulty level than they'd tried previously. At the end of the term, we like to do a watching week where we bring parents into the classroom for the last 5 or 10 minutes of the class, and students do a little performance there. That is kind of the most relaxed environment for a performance and the least organisation required from the school's perspective you can possibly do. The parents are going to be there to pick up their child at the end of the class anyway. They're going to come into the classroom 5 or 10 minutes early, and then we give out a little certificate. We have certificates for you in 2 forms. One, you're just going to print them and get your marker out and write the student's name. That's the low-tech version. But if you ended up with, you know, dozens of students, there's actually a Canva template and a video instructions of how to upload the students' names into that automatically from like a spreadsheet kind of thing. And then you can just print the lot out. So if you're not sitting there with your marker pen all day writing students' names into things. And they have the objectives on there of what the students achieved in that, doing that workbook.
Cool.
I've done a lot of talking. Any questions so far?
Questions so far. I wouldn't mind seeing like the teacher training videos. Is it just one video per lesson as well, or is it just sort of overall concepts?
So let me close all of this stuff on my screen and open that for you. So we've just been updating all of the stuff. Share my screen again. So this was actually one that, it's actually the same book that I just showed you. How's that? Welcome to the teacher training lesson video for our mystery workbook. What I've got here on the left is the workbook itself. So there's the different pages of it. So that's what you would print out for your students. And what I have here on the right is the lesson plans for this particular workbook. So I'll go through them together to show you how it works. On the inside cover, we have a little picture just to help students. I might actually fast forward a bit because I realise that that's quite repetitive of what I've just explained to you. So they're going to hear it, they're going to understand that these notes go.
But actually, while
leave it at that.
while we're listening, would you recommend a teacher to like do the course first before like starting the actual teaching, or they can sort of do it?
I think the idea of teaching group classes is a pretty big shift from teaching one-on-one. And I think that you need to understand what the approach is and have a bit of time to process that before you're standing in a room full of students going, how on earth do I do this? So there's some kind of generic background teacher training that I would really recommend that they do beforehand. But once they're up and running, like they don't necessarily need to have done all of the teacher training videos for the entire term before they start the term. They could, once they get the overall concepts of it, do them like each week for the lesson coming up. But I wouldn't recommend doing it 5 minutes before. You kind of need some time to think about, well, how am I going to do this with the students that I have? And once you've been teaching it for a while and you get the rhythm of it, you understand what to expect, then, you know, teachers won't necessarily be so reliant on it. Some of the hurdles that can come up of teachers going, one other thing I should say, teachers who've previously taught one-on-one can be terrified at the prospect of 4 students in a room. But teachers who've come from classroom teaching say to me, what, only 6, not 25, piece of cake.
Yeah.
So, and those are completely valid responses from people just based on the experience that they have. But there is a mindset and a skill set involved in teaching group classes, which is quite different to private lessons. Obviously, you need to be able to play the instrument. But if you kind of, even the term private lesson, people, without even thinking about it, think of that as like the private jet and the private dining room and the private membership to the special whatever. We think of private lessons as a premium product without necessarily stepping back and going, well, why? Do we learn dance in private lessons? Do we learn karate in private lessons? Do we learn coding in private lessons? Do we learn, I don't know, think of a thing that kids are commonly enrolled in to do. How many of them are private lessons?
Yeah.
Are we such delicate flowers as musicians that we have to have private lessons? Or is it just, well, I learnt in private lessons, so that has to be how. But my teacher is tailoring the lesson to what my musical needs are in that moment. And in that statement, there's an assumption that that's not possible to do that in group classes. And I think if you have the right materials, it's absolutely possible to do that in a group setting. And you get a whole bunch of other benefits that you don't get in private lessons. So people might not even realize that they have that mindset that private lessons are better. And I think sometimes teachers can be nervous about it. They might think that, oh, if I teach groups, if I taught 4 students in a group, that could be 4 private lessons that I could be teaching and I'd earn more money. So I'm doing myself a disservice. I actually think of it in a much different way. We can offer lessons to more students if we give them a group setting. And it can be more affordable for them. So there's certain people that might not be able to do private lessons at all, but they might be able to do a group lesson.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, there is a mindset shift. And even the people can sometimes be concerned of managing behaviour in group classes. And my very strong advice on that is, if you start to see the beginnings of a seed, of a sliver of the start of some bad behaviour, you've got to be onto that instantaneously. Not necessarily, I mean, it doesn't mean you have to become a evil dictator, but you've got to address it straight away. And it can be with kindness and it can be with fun, and you can make a joke about it, but you got to address it. So, you know, somebody's just twiddling away on their instrument. If you've got 4 kids all doing that in a class, you've lost control. Yeah, you've let go of the reins, the horses are doing their own thing. So you've got to immediately go, in our class, here's what we expect. We expect this and this and this and this. If the teacher is talking, your hands are on your lap, or whatever the rules are that you're going to have for your class. Or if they're talking to each other over the top of the teacher, those sorts of things, we need to make the expectations of class behaviour really, really clear. And always be ready to change activities up. If people are getting restless, you've got to always go, right, we're going to play a game. And you've got to have 3 or 4 games in the back of your mind ready to go right in that instant. So keeping the class moving and always being ready to go with something can do that. We have like a little rule of thumb that if you're ever going to speak to a student one-on-one, before you do that, you've got to make sure that everybody else in the class knows exactly what they're expected to do, some productive musical thing. So you guys are going to play that 3 times. I'm just going to talk to Bill for a minute. You're going to write the whatever in your book while I talk to Samantha for a minute. So never just put all your attention on one student, because everyone else in the class is going, huh? But those little, and there is material on the website about that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's the stuff that people can be nervous about. Like, well, what am I going to do if the class goes feral on me? Hands in the air. Don't do that with guitar students if they're holding on to their Does that give you a bit of an overview?
Yeah. No, that's very useful. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, probably just like how much does it cost? I don't think I've seen.
I can show you that it's different for in different currencies. It's just the way that. Hang on. It's annoying when Zoom puts its stuff over the top of the website.
Also with the course, you know, so like imagine I start doing the group lessons. So obviously I would own the account because it's my school. Is there like the possibility of adding like teachers' own email address to the account so they have access to it, or do they have to use my?
At this point, it's a matter of you would share the login with your staff members. And what I have with my staff members in their employment contract is that the materials that are provided by the school that are paid for and licensed by the school are only to be used within the school, and they're not to use them elsewhere.
Yeah, okay.
What else can I help you with?
Oh yeah, just sorry, how much was it?
Oh, it's, for Australians, it's $100 per month.
Okay, yeah.
And at this point, we have 5 workbooks for the 4-year-old plus age group. We have 5 workbooks for the 7-year-old plus age group. We have, at this point in time, 1 for the 9-year-old plus age group, and that stuff's quite a bit more complex. I can show you that if you like. So that's got some more complex chords in it. Pentatonic scale, a much more detailed place to be writing in where to find different notes. Got a major blues over 2 pages in 2 parts. Private Eye song, I've got a swing song, and that's kind of like a bass line. Got some other things going on in there, dynamics and bits and pieces. So, you know, this is not for complete beginners, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Actually, another question I had, so because I think you said you have like also like games or things like that. So
share that screen again.
Are they ever like recommended in like particular lesson plans? Like what game might be appropriate for that lesson?
So what's a good way of explaining this? That's where it's kind of what works for a given teacher on a given day with a given group of students. So there's a bunch of games here. There's some rhythm ones. There's a match the note one. Actually, possibly better if I pull them out of the already downloaded ones. So here's the match the note game. Print the last 4 pages double-sided. Laminate, cut individual cards, or on card, which I found a bit quicker to do. Cut individual cards, or you can put them on stickers and stick them on regular playing cards. You have a set for each student or a set between 2 or 3. And then there's 3 different options of what you can do with these cards. They match them. First student to or team that gets them all correct wins. You can do it as a memory game. You can use them as snap. That's just there so that the double siding works. So this is what they look like. And that's the back of each card. And then there's those ones. So they've got to match that A with the A from here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's helpful if you've got a double-sided printer. What else have we got? Guitar neck game. You need some pom-poms or coloured dots. You can just get that stuff from eBay or whatever. And the laminated guitar neck. So there's several different versions of games that you can use here, and that's what it looks like. So they're going to put the coloured pom-poms or dots down on there to indicate what the teacher asked them. So the game itself, like what in terms of what you print, could be used for multiple different games, which is why we haven't kind of put them in with the workbooks. And it's good to have games at your disposal that you can pull out when you've got a bit of spare time at the end of the class, or ones that you're going to pull out because you've got a particular concept that you want to get across to students, and that game's going to help you. Find the note on the guitar. So this one doesn't even have any equipment. A teacher asks student to play a note on or chord on the guitar. First one gets a smiley face. Students get additional points for helping other students. Okay. And you know that your teachers will have games that they use themselves that they either will or won't find useful in a group setting. And we're teaching this in our studio at the moment. And as we add things, we put them up there for everyone who's using the program to access as well. So it's growing as we go along.
Great. Awesome. Cool. Thanks for that.
Pleasure.
Yeah, that sounds very
covered everything. Unless there's any other questions, you can always email me or, let me know, get hold of me on Facebook.
Great. Cool. Thank you. Yeah. No, that's been definitely a lot for me to think about, but
is it something you're thinking you might roll out?
Yeah, probably it would take a few months for me to just set up everything and figure out the logistics and, who's going to be taking the class, how many classes do I want to run, that kind of thing. So
one thing you could do is if you've got a way of contacting potential students, I don't know if you've got an email list or Facebook groups or whatever, make yourself a little Google form, which is an expression of interest, and ask them what days of the week they're available, what age they are, or their date of birth, and then do the calculation, which means you'll always have a current answer to that question. And if they've done guitar before or not. Because that way you can hopefully be able to go, great, on a Tuesday at 4:30, I've got 3 students. I can actually advertise that class and know that I've got a starting point. But if you just pick Tuesday at 4:30, you might find that the students who might be a good fit for that class are only available on a Wednesday.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Cool.
There's a video on this as well, but I just thought I might quickly show you the setup. That's the guitar stand.
Oh yeah. Oh no, that's cool. We've got one.
Oh, excellent. And just some things to think about if they're electric. We tend to use brightly coloured leads, so it's really obvious who's plugged into which channel. You can do
actually can the workbooks be used for any?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, easy.
The way I see it, if someone has got in their heart of hearts that they want to play acoustic guitar, I'm not going to stop them. And likewise, if somebody really desperately wants to play electric guitar, I'm also not going to stop them.
Yeah.
So we have classes with a mixture, and it's completely fine.
Okay.
You can do a music stand 1 between 2 if you're in a small space. And I know you're thinking you can't possibly do group classes until you find a commercial space to operate out of, but you'd be surprised, and kids are physically smaller than adults, you'd be surprised how many guitar students you can fit in a fairly small room.
Well, I'm lucky because just across the road there's like a family community center and they have a room available on Saturdays. So I've already located a potential space. But otherwise, probably, yeah, for my living room, can do four-ish students.
And then there are music schools that have a table for writing, which people move to. I've never had the space to do that, and all I've done is give every child a clipboard and they do their writing on the floor, and kids don't mind sitting on the floor doing stuff. And a lot of the games you might want to do on the floor anyway. Marker pen for each student, some kind of seating, definitely no arms, and really little people will probably need a footrest. You can buy guitar specific footrests, and they're kind of metal and they've got bendy bits. They kind of fold like a board but small. And I just look at them and go, somebody's going to jam their finger in that. And I've ended up using yoga blocks. They're indestructible. You can drop them. You can do whatever you like.
Reliable.
They're reliable, and you might even already have some. And yeah, so that's a tip there. We tend to have just one guitar in case there's a brand new student that really doesn't want to spend the money to buy an instrument until they've tried it out. And that's a 3/4 size guitar. You could not. You could say you must have a guitar to start classes. You're going to need one to practice on anyway. I mean, if you are going to offer guitar, electric guitar, I would suggest that you need a multi-channel amp. Because I think making people bring an amp as well as their guitar every week, that's kind of a lot and it's annoying. And if you've got multiple electric guitar students, they're all going to have to turn up with it, plug it in, put it somewhere. It's easier to just go, here's the lead, plug it into your guitar, have that sorted. And just think about who's left and right-handed and who's acoustic and electric, so that you minimise two guitar necks being bash into each other's zone. Whiteboard is nice to have.
Okay, yeah, that's easy.
I reckon I've probably talked enough. I think.
Yeah, I think I've got a good overview. So thanks for that.
No problem.
It's great. At least, like, if I want to run group lessons, like, there's one thing I don't have to think about, like the curriculum and all of that. So that's going to be very useful.
Having it with a differentiation in it, and having it with a cyclical multiple workbooks, I actually think it makes the difference between it working and not working.
Yeah. Great.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks for your time.
See ya. Bye.
All right. Bye.